Prepping can be anything from a few spare items around the house to full-on survivalism with bunkers and 10 years worth of food storage. This video is aimed at people who are starting prepping from scratch, and what I want to do is show you how you can be many more times prepared than most people with minimal kit and, most importantly, minimal cost. Hi, this is Everyday Prepper. My name is Steve. I've been prepping for over 10 years now in my own personal way, and the reason I say that is because prepping is very, very individual. You'll find there's a lot of disagreement between preppers. There's no particular manual to follow, and when you're starting out, it's easy to get completely overwhelmed. When I first started, my biggest challenge was to figure out what I was preparing for. And I realised later that that was really the wrong approach. What I needed to do was prepare for basically everything all at once. Now, bear with me because that sounds costly. And when I said it's easy to get overwhelmed, you know, if you were to type in prepping into Google, it'll probably come up with a few prepping stores, and there's tons and tons of stuff that you can buy from military surplus, you know, right the way through to you know, long-term stored meals and that kind of stuff. If you type prepping into YouTube, you may well get some of the really big channels, established prepping channels, where and get the idea that the only thing that you should be prepping for is World War III on a daily basis. And that would be an easy mistake to make. Now, you know, how do you prepare for World War III? You know, if I was starting now, I'd be overwhelmed. So let's start at the beginning. What do you need to survive? You need food, you need water, you need shelter. So your first priority when you're starting out prepping will be, in my opinion, and this is only just my opinion, other preppers may start differently, but I would recommend starting out with buying some extra food on your weekly or monthly or whenever you go shopping. Just chuck a couple of extra tins of things that you eat. That was another mistake I made early on, was buying tins of stuff that would store a long time, but not necessarily stuff that I wanted to eat. The reason I say that is because you're going to want to rotate your stock, because you may find that you actually, even in your preparedness, you might prepare and then a few years later nothing major has happened and you haven't had to use any of your preps, so your food stock will start to go out of date. Now, that's not really a problem if it's tinned food, because it will last a lot longer than what the label says, but you do want to rotate it. You do want to sort of eat through some of it, and that's why I suggest you buy things that you're going to eat anyway. So it can be simple as that, really. First goal might be to have an extra 3 days worth of food just stored, or an extra week's worth, and then move on to a couple of weeks worth of food. And we'll talk about what you're prepping for in just a second, because it's wide and varied. Next thing you're going to need is water storage. So water takes up a lot of space, takes up a lot of weight. You want to be careful where you store it. If you're storing it on something that doesn't support the weight, bearing in mind 1 litre of water weighs 1 kilo. You know, the average person needs to drink about 2 litres a day, so they say. So the general rule of thumb with water is that each person will need 1 gallon of water per day. So if you're storing water for 1 person for 2 weeks, you're going to need 14 gallons. And a gallon is about 4.5 litres. So you can buy these 5 litre bottles of water in the supermarket fairly cheaply, but bearing in mind, you know, just 2 weeks worth for 1 person is going to be like 14 of those. So it depends on what kind of space you've got. So then you go down the route of, well, if I was long term, you know, I've got my food and I can't store my water. I've got my food, but I can't store my water because I haven't got enough room. Then you need some kind of water filtration and some method of collecting water. I'm not going to go into the details of all of that really, but you know, there's ways of collecting rainwater, but certainly rainwater, if you're collected off your roof, you can have bird droppings on your roof. It needs to be filtered to get all the nasties out of it. Some people, you know, with a garden will have a water barrel which collects water off the rainwater off the roof, but to drink that you would definitely need some way of filtering it. Now, in my house I use a British Berkefeld water filtration system. I'll leave links to all of any of the kit. I'll leave links in the description below just to show you what I'm talking about. The filter system that I've got won't necessarily filter every single nasty out of the water, but if I was on a boil water notice, or if I was told by my water board that there was a problem with the water supply, then I would just make sure I boil the water, and then after it's gone through the filter, and that way I'd know that it would absolutely be safe to drink. But you could also get something a little bit cheaper, a little bit less cumbersome, like a Life Straw or a Sawyer mini filter, and these will happily filter thousands of gallons of water over time. They take a bit of time to process the water, but they'll give you, drinkable water from pretty much any source. Now, again, as I said, there's no prepping manual, there's no regulations for prepping as such, apart from the normal UK laws that you'd obviously have to stick to. So anything that I suggest here, if I'm suggesting filtration and all that kind of thing, make sure you read the label on the item. If you do get some kind of filtration in, make sure you do your own research on how these are to be used and what they can and can't do. Know the limitations, basically. Now, I liken prepping, for me personally, again, I liken prepping to camping, because my experience with camping, if you're out camping, so we used to go on camping holidays in a tent for say 2 weeks, so you'd have a way of cooking a meal. So it would be a gas stove, portable gas stove with some gas canisters. Then you'd obviously have your tent, that's your shelter. You'd have some stored food. You'd try and keep it minimal. You try and keep the weight down, so it wouldn't all be tins. It might involve some fresh stuff, but also some dried stuff like dried pasta, rice, that kind of stuff that you can store. Obviously, when we were on holiday, we could easily we could go to the supermarkets and everything else. The idea of prepping is that if the supermarkets aren't there and you need to rely on your stash for a little while, then that's the idea. So when you're buying extra food, don't just buy tins, maybe buy some extra pasta to bulk out meals, buy dried stuff like noodles, rice, as long as it's things you'll eat. But back to camping, we have a caravan, and when we first took our caravan out, you would fill up the big water barrels from the tap that's provided on the campsite, if we were on a campsite with water, and most of them do, and then you would use that supply in the caravan. But it was a bit of a chore having to take all the plumbing out of it and then roll it back down to the tap, which could be quite some way away, and fill it up and then bring it back. I mean, that's part of camping, but what that forced you to be was reserved with your water use. Camping will make you innovative, because there's always stuff that goes wrong, things will break, washing lines will break, stuff like that, and you have to use the resources that you've got with you. There's no going home or going down the DIY store, because quite often we go camping in reasonably remote places. So if you've never been camping, I would strongly recommend it, because it does, as I say, force you to innovate and force you to be careful of your resource use, so your water and your food and everything else. And as far as I'm concerned, if you've got camping equipment, then that's part of your prepping kit, really. Because if you had to bug out, you've got a form of shelter. You've got a way of cooking that's portable. You'll probably have a foldable water flagon that stores away nicely, but fills up and carries a lot of water. You'll probably have a water filtration system that's, again, portable. So yeah, camping equipment definitely spills over into the prepping equipment side of things. So there's a phrase that goes around the prepping community, which is 1 is none and 2 is 1, or 2 is 1 and 1 is none. So basically you have a backup of a backup. So if you have you got a torch? Have you got a torch in the house? If the lights were to go out, have you got a torch or a lantern or some kind of light? The only difference between that and a potential prepper is that a prepper will have 2 or more, or several, and you can expand from there. Have you got an umbrella? In case, why have you got an umbrella? Well, in case it rains. Okay, so what if there's a leak in your roof? Have you got a tarp that will redirect water to where you want it to go rather than all over the carpet? So prepping isn't just about a major catastrophe or World War III, or a meteorite hitting, or a coronal mass ejection from the sun. Prepping is not, for me personally, it's not about that. It's more about things that will disrupt your daily life on a day-to-day basis. And there are plenty of things in life that can be disrupted. So, I used to have power cuts in the 70s where I lived in the south of England. We used to have power cuts that would probably not last more than a few hours, maybe 12 hours max. And since then, I've never, not once, had a power cut that has lasted wherever I've lived, and that's from London right the way to down the south. I've never had a power cut that's lasted more than a few hours, maybe overnight, a few hours during the night. It's usually at night time anyway. And do you know what? where I delivery drive, I do delivery driving for a living, and I drive around my local town, and I'm constantly being held up by the roads being dug up on a daily basis. There's new traffic lights going up, they are digging up the road left, right and centre. So I'm convinced that our infrastructure must be pretty damn good, because they have either replaced the whole lot, either that, or it's completely aging and they keep needing to repair it. But I'm confident that our grid situation is pucker and will never go down. But that hasn't stopped me preparing for a pretty much long-term grid down situation, just in case. So moving on from that, you've got your food, you've got a bit of water, you've got a filtration process, and you've got a way of collecting your water. So shelter is obviously important. If you've got anything to do with camping, then you'll have a tent, you'll have some form of shelter that if you had to bug out and there was nowhere else to go, then you've got some way of keeping yourself dry and potentially warm. If nothing else, just some kind of tarps to get under cover would be enough to start with anyway. Moving on from that, you can take it as far as you want to go. Most people will have a first aid kit of some sort. Well, why would you have a first aid kit? Well, in case you cut yourself. Well, why don't you just go down to the hospital? Well, because if you cut yourself, you can probably sort it out at home. So all a prepper will have is something for wounds that are a bit more serious, or that, say there was a major incident in your area and the hospitals weren't taking people in. They were only dealing with casualties from that particular incident. And that happens all the time in the UK. Or happens reasonably often. So if you were unlucky enough to be someone who cut themselves really badly or had a bad medical issue and couldn't get to the hospital because they weren't taking anyone else in, then you'd need to have some kit. That's what preparedness is about, is having some kit, so that you just got to imagine a scenario where most of your services or utilities, just imagine, go through each one of them one by one if they were not available, if a hospital wasn't available, if your water was suddenly cut off or contaminated, if your electricity was stopped for a period of time, if your gas was stopped for a period of time and you cook on gas. I know a lot of households don't have gas now. Have you got another way of cooking? So, even down to a portable gas stove, and again, that's where camping equipment comes into its own. You'd have all that. So what I'm trying to say here is starting out prepping doesn't have to be anywhere near, digging a bunker, having 10 years of food supply, having 10 water bowsers in your garden, several stage, water filtration, all that sort of stuff. You don't need that to start out prepping. And I think it would be easy, again, to be overwhelmed with all the information and think, I can't possibly do all of that. I can't possibly prepare for all of these different scenarios. But you've got to start somewhere. So start with food, start with water, a means to get water, a means to filter water. You can treat water also with water purification tablets. They're very cheap online. You can get them in the hundreds for a few pounds, and they will treat thousands and thousands of litres worth of water. It's just like a bleachy tablet, but it will make it drinkable. If you've got a first aid kit, maybe get 2 or 3 more. Or just get another one, just as a backup. Get your backup of your first aid kit, because gradually you'll run out of plasters. How many people remember to stock up on on plasters in their first aid kit? If you don't really use it, do you actually check what's in your first aid kit? You can buy one off the shelf with various bits and pieces inside. Do you know how to use all of that? And again, I'm sticking to basics. You can buy tourniquets online. You can do makeshift tourniquets with bandages. If you're going to use a tourniquet, then learn how to use one. There's plenty of resources online as to how to properly use one and know where to get a decent one, not one that's going to break in during an emergency when you actually really need it to work. Also, as far as lighting's concerned, for me personally, I prefer stuff with rechargeable batteries. The reason for that is because I use solar power a lot. I've got various solar power systems around my house that I use to charge my phones on, charge my radios, and I find that torches with rechargeable batteries saves you having to store batteries, and just means you can charge them for thousands of times before those batteries die out. If there was a supply chain issue, for instance, along with a bit of a grid down or a power cut, and you couldn't get hold of new torches or new batteries, then at least the ones you've got you can charge on a solar system without worrying about where you're going to source your batteries from, for instance. Take you back to COVID times, when there was queues for supermarkets. If you'd run out of battery, if we had a power cut during that time and you run out of batteries, you're going to get down to the supermarket and you find that you're queuing up for half a mile and then get in there to find there's nothing left on the shelves. If you've got some rechargeable batteries that you can just literally stick a small solar panel out the back and charge that torch up, job done. So when I'm buying any kind of electronics, I try and go for anything that can be charged by USB, just because USB is nice low wattage and easy to be powered by solar. So look, that was just a start. I may do a little bit of a series of these, going into a bit more depth each time, but I thought it might be just important to cover the basics. I have done it before. I've done previous videos on the basics as well, but I've done some looking around recently on on YouTube, for instance, and it's very easy to just, there's a minefield of information out there, and there's also a minefield of opinions, and my opinion may not be right for you. I know what I've done is right for me. I've learned a lot as I've gone. I've learned a lot from mistakes as I've gone along. The easiest way to personalise prepping to yourself. So look at your daily routine and think, if there was any disruption to that routine, what backup have you got, and what backup of backup have you got? And then take it from there, really. So that's just a couple of recommendations. I hope you found it useful. Let me know what you think in the comments. Especially if you're brand new to prepping and you're looking for guidance. If you are brand new to prepping and you've just come across this channel, then please check out the other videos on the channel, and if you like what you see, please consider subscribing. Press the like button on any videos you like. In the meantime, thanks very much for watching, and stay prepared.